When all were inside, Jehovah shut the door. Can you picture the family huddling together inside the ark, listening, straining to hear? Then it came, rain. Perhaps it began almost imperceptibly, but soon it came in torrents. The sound was deafening. What they had long anticipated was now happening. They were tired, exhausted, but there was likely little sleep that night. There were animals to check. There was the din of the rain, and how they prayed. Did their thoughts turn to those outside? Certainly. They knew those people and had preached to them. Many were relatives. How sad for them. Like Jehovah, Noah took no delight in the death of the wicked. It saddened him that so many had to die, but he knew that those who perished had ample warning of what was to come.
So this again is story time with Uncle Tony. Tony Morris is revisiting the story of Noah, and we're up to the part where people start dying. Because it's raining, because God's plan for eradicating all evil from the planet is not to just snap his fingers and all evil people disappear. No, he needs to do it in this huge, implausible melodrama that's scientifically impossible, so impossible that it can't be believed in the future by people reading the story in his word, the Bible. That's the best way, apparently, of solving this problem of evil. Let's drown them all with more water than exists on our world, water high enough to reach the peak of Everest, which we know couldn't happen. I've touched on this before in previous videos. Climate change has made rising sea levels a hot topic, so it's possible with very little searching to see models of what the world would look like if all available water was in our oceans and no longer bound up in the form of ice or glaciers. We can see what that world would look like. Coastlines all around the world would be decimated. Islands would be annihilated in the Pacific. But guess what? There would still be continents. There would still be a lot of dry land. In other words, there simply isn't enough water on our world to achieve what's being described here by Tony as a historical event. But what I found most interesting is the way Tony describes the death. Again, this is all completely inappropriate for children to be sitting through. Many kids will be sitting through this talk horrified at the idea of people drowning outside the ark, losing their lives because they don't have air, because they are in the water. They can't breathe. They're drowning. Again, what a grisly way for a God of love to implement his plan. I'm going to drown everybody. I'm going to drown not just the humans, but all the animals. But notice the tone of Tony Morris when he's considering what it would have been like for Noah's family, knowing that there were people dying outside the ark.
How sad for them. Like Jehovah, Noah took no delight in the death of the wicked. It saddened him that so many had to die.
Noah took no delight in the death of the wicked. It saddened him that so many had to die. Remember, this whole melodrama is being linked to the times that we're living in today. Tony Morris began this grisly story time episode by reminding us that apparently all of this awaits us in the future. We're living in the last days now. So just as wicked people died in Noah's flood, wicked people are also soon going to die at Armageddon because they're not Jehovah's Witnesses, because they don't recognize his authority. And yet here he's contemplating, oh, so sad. It would have been so sad for Noah. with all this death around him. How did Tony recently describe the impending death of the wicked at Armageddon?
Just to emphasize this, but the wicked will perish, the enemies of Jehovah will vanish like glorious pastures. Particularly, they will vanish like smoke. So I thought this would be a nice memory aid to this verse stay in the mind. Here's what Jehovah's promising. As Jehovah's enemies, they're going to vanish like smoke.
Yeah, Tony looks really sad there, doesn't he? He looks overwhelmed with sadness at the thought of Jehovah's enemies dying at an impending Armageddon. You can see the double standard here, can't you? When he needs to be Uncle Tony, relating the story of Noah's flood with children in the audience, and he's touching on the idea of everyone drowning outside the ark, he needs to sound all compassionate. He needs to sound like he isn't some cold-hearted, PTSD-ridden monster. But when he is with his friends at morning worship, surrounded by a Bethel audience, and he's contemplating the death of people who don't observe his authority in the here and now, including people like myself who are critical of him, who expose the many twisted things that he has to say publicly, it's a different story. And all of a sudden he's gleeful at the prospect of all that death.
Even if they hadn't seen the ark Noah was building, they would have heard about it. They'd know why he was building it. Now it was too late for them. Jehovah had shut the door. Noah's family listened as the rain battered the ark without letting. And then came a moment they would never forget. Movement. They felt their massive wooden ark lifting from the ground. It was floating. Their hearts were beating loud and fast. Would their vessel hold together?
No, it wouldn't. It's a physical impossibility for a wooden structure of that type to float on an ocean without breaking up. It would have defied the laws of physics if it held together with absolutely no metal reinforcement. A wooden vessel that big would have twisted up and broken on the high seas almost immediately, especially without the benefit of modern shipbuilding techniques. Just some amateur chopping down trees and lashing them together and coating them with tar and bitumen and whatever. No, it wouldn't have floated. But more importantly, what the hell, Tony? What have you just shown to all of the children in the audience? We've already had in this talk Tony casually suggesting that the materialized angels might have raped people. We then have depictions of the Nephilim strangling people and grabbing women by the arm, children in the audience. And now we're treated, if Tibor is gracious, he will show us, now we're treated to the spectacle of people either drowning or about to drown. Children in the audience required to be in the audience because it's their religion, because their parents have to make sure their children sit through this. And they're being forced to watch this. They're being forced to think about people drowning outside of the ark, clinging to the rocks as the waters rise around them. How messed up can you get? How out of touch with basic principles of what is or isn't age appropriate for children can you be?
And then it came. Jehovah's command, go out of the ark. At last. What a joyful day that must have been. They'd been in the ark for 370 days. Picture the family coming out of the ark, laughing, breathing fresh air, eager to adjust to their new life. The animals came out too, and the family watched as they dispersed in all directions. Some they'd drawn close to, but now it was farewell, a happy farewell. There were no materialized angels, no Nephilim, and no wicked people. How grateful they were to Jehovah. Noah wasted no time. He built an altar and sacrificed to Jehovah, and God expressed his pleasure. Jehovah assured the family that he would never again strike down every living thing. But he did more than that. He concluded a covenant with Noah and his sons and gave them a sign that we too can observe. What a magnificent sign Jehovah gave. Every rainbow would remind both God and man of his promise. How Noah's family must have marveled to see the colors spanning across the sky. Violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. Never again will a flood deluge the earth.
Yes, with it being Pride Month, I couldn't help but take that opportunity when Tony's talking about the rainbow to just make sure the pride flag is billowing in the wind there as Tony is describing the first ever rainbow. Apparently that's how rainbows began. It was a sign some 4,000 or 5,000 years ago that God would never again obliterate humankind by drowning them. He'd do it some other way. We also have, of course, that artwork of the animals exiting the ark, accompanied by Tony's touching narration about how it would have been emotional for Noah's family to part with these animals, these essentially 6.5 million pets that they'd been making over the course of a year, shoveling all of their bodily waste and feeding them. Finally, it's time for them to exit the ark. And upon exiting the ark, of course, the carnivores very graciously waited for the herbivores to reproduce before feasting on them, because of course otherwise there would have been immediate extinctions. And furthermore, the penguins began their long epic journey to Antarctica, and the kangaroos began their long journey, including a long voyage to Australia.
Today, we live in a world that resembles the one before the flood. There's violence, and people do all sorts of things that Jehovah hates. People are concerned with the everyday affairs of life and take no note of the message of salvation that we proclaim. Ridiculers of God's people mockingly say, "Where is this promised presence of His? Why, all things are continuing exactly as they were from creation's beginning." They are wrong. Jehovah acted against wickedness in the time of Noah, and He'll act again. But like Noah, the faithful will be saved. God's word assures us Jehovah knows how to rescue people of godly devotion out of trial, but to reserve unrighteous people to be destroyed on the day of judgment. Jehovah will make the earth a paradise, just as He originally purposed. The paradise will be inhabited by good people. There will be no people who rebel against God. Faith moved Noah to obey Jehovah. As a result, he and his family survived the flood. Noah lived a long life, some 950 years. But when that faithful man is resurrected, he'll have the prospect of living forever. If we display the faith of Noah and obey Jehovah, we too can walk with Jehovah as our friend, and that friendship can last forever.
Thus concludes Story Time with Uncle Tony. Yes, a rousing finish to the item Noah, faith moved him to obey. The dramatic Bible reading which Anthony Morris, governing body member, has helped us through, wasting no opportunity to terrify his audience, specifically children in the audience, with completely inappropriate words and images. And right at the end, we see why Tony Morris in particular would have enjoyed this story of annihilation and destruction. It's because as a governing body member, he seems to relish the idea of people being destroyed who don't accept his authority. He can't wait, apparently, to be raptured up to heaven during the Great Tribulation before Armageddon, so that he can ride around in his toga on his heavenly horse, clutching his bottle of Macallan's, slaughtering people like me who won't accept his authority now. That's what this man is looking forward to. That's why he is so obsessed with Noah's story, and I'm sure would have jumped at the opportunity to do this particular gig at the convention. He loves the idea of death and destruction for anyone he perceives as wicked or ungodly.